Okay, Preston, I am so pumped that we are finally doing your podcast.
About
Um,
time.
okay, first of all, I would not have done this podcast if it wasn't for you. Like, it was this idea floating in my mind for a long time. And then when I saw you at the conference, it was like I knew it needed to happen. Like, I don't know. Like I'm super grateful that we ran into each other and talked about it because it would have never come to be had I not ran into you and talked about it.
Well,
So,
I remember when you were telling me about it, I had like goosebumps. Like, this is so cool. Like, why isn't there a podcast like this? Because my story is not unique at all. You know,
right.
I've worked in recovery for, as you know, a lot of years and been in recovery a lot of years, and I just met so many guys and women who have very similar stories, and like that. That's how I got sober. Is when I heard stories from guys who had been in my shoes, but yet they had like that light in their eyes that I wanted, that I recognized. They seemed happy and I wasn't happy. So it kind of gave me hope, like, okay, I can do this. Like, you can recover, you can get better. So when you told me about it, I was like, yeah, this is so cool. You got to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad we had that conversation for sure.
Yes. Me too. So, okay, let's kind of start at the beginning. Like, what was your early years like? What did you have a testimony at a young age? What did that look like?
So yeah, I grew up in the church. Awesome family. I think, you know, I- in Utah growing up, the church was we went pretty much every Sunday. I played soccer growing up. I'm the oldest of five kids. Um, and you know, just pretty normal family for the most part. We had a lot of emotional constipation, I think, in our family. We had a therapist when my brother was in treatment. The therapist told my parents that we were probably one of the most emotionally constipated families that she'd ever worked with.
Love that term.
Yeah, my dad's dad was an alcoholic. Mom's dad was in the military. Yeah, just my parents didn't have the emotional IQ that I think your average parent has, but they got they can connect well. I think it's maybe partly a cultural thing after, thinking about this a lot and talking to other people and sharing my story and kind of process it a bit. As a culture, we kind of put on this persona of perfectionism, like especially I think in LDS culture, everything's got to look okay. It's got, if you got a problem, maybe just don't talk about it, or it's just maybe part of the culture. But at least in our family, just it was more so, I think, with our family, just emotionally didn't talk about kind of maybe how we felt if we're having a bad day. I remember my mom, if I came home from school and I was mad about something, she'd say, let it, water off a duck's back type of attitude, like just roll with the punches. Like, so as a kid, I just kind of learned just, don't talk about my emotions very much. And, which probably kind of led to a lot of different things, but yeah, that's kind of how I grew up. As far as getting into trouble, that started pretty early in life. I kind of liked, going against the grain a little bit. Me and my brother Tyson were kind of like, partners in crime. We both kind of liked, doing things for, an adrenaline rush. And so we kind of started getting in trouble as kids a little bit, and then, slowly got worse. But yeah, that's kind of where things started. So for the most part,
Do you feel like you had a testimony at a young age, or do you feel like you were kind of just like, you know,
no, I did actually. I for sure did. Learned to pray and would pray as a kid, and I felt, uh, I feel like I learned to recognize the spirit at a young age, and so I for sure had a testimony of. But it was never really tested until I started going through some real trials. I think that faith is having hope. And it's not really a perfect knowledge of things, and so I for sure had the hope, but I didn't it didn't get strengthened until I had to start asking the right questions.
hmm totally. So what kind of led you to, you know, what kind of led to your darkest place or where you kind of hit your rock bottom? What did that look like?
So what kind of led me there is, I think that the adversary is really masterful at kind of like that analogy. If you put a frog in a warm pot, right? And slowly turn it up, he's not going to jump out. He's going to like it, feels warm, and pretty soon he's cooked. If you throw him in a hot pot, he's going to immediately jump out. So, I kind of started just kind of making bad decisions, just small, and justifying them and rationalizing them. Like, oh, I can do this or I can do that. I mean, this isn't that bad. And then I had a girlfriend, so started doing things with her and justifying and rationalizing, and then didn't make the soccer team, so thought I wasn't good enough. And I loved soccer growing up. That's why I threw that in there, because after that I kind of had to start making different friends, because a lot of my friends went to play soccer, and started, I think kind of there's this a little bit of a hole there that used to be filled with soccer that was no longer there. So, well, what do I do for fun now? So then I started drinking. I remember my friends, got home, like brought some Bacardi Silvers over, and like, hey, this isn't really alcohol. It's like, yeah, it's like it's not a beer. It's a Bacardi. It's like a fruit drink type thing. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try that. And before I know it, I was kind of down this little rabbit hole that I kind of liked. It was kind of exciting, and it was so controversial to me, because when I drank, I felt good enough. I felt okay. I felt like I was enough,
Hmm.
and so it was really easy to rationalize it for a while. And but I kind of knew there's that cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, okay, well, I probably shouldn't be doing this. It's against my values. It's against the church, but like, no one ever told me it makes me feel better. I always heard these stories. Oh, if you're an alcoholic, you're going to be homeless down
Yeah.
under the bridge type of thing. And so I continue to do these different things, and same thing happened with pain pills. You get your wisdom teeth out, you take pain pills. Oh, this is really cool. And one thing leads to another, to where what happened to me, it got to the point where I was waking up withdrawing. Then I had to take more, and then it turned into harder drugs because I couldn't buy pills. And then it turned into, oh my gosh, I don't even like the guy looking back in the mirror anymore.
Hmm.
I don't trust him. And in this complete state of, having suicidal thoughts that, I can't do this life thing. This sucks. And, then I'm trying to use just to feel normal,
Right.
and so that's when it got real bad. And then my brother was using right along with me, and we've been huge supports with each other in recovery. But it's just kind of how things worked out, and I didn't start asking the right questions until I was waking up in the morning, and I had this huge, I call it a God-shaped hole now, that I was trying to fill with all these other things, drugs and alcohol, and I was so emotionally, well, more spiritually disconnected at the time, well, and emotionally, than anything. But I didn't recognize it back then. When you're in that state of mind, from a biological standpoint, I didn't realize that my midbrain, was really running the show, and that prefrontal cortex that helps manage your emotions and your thinking. You're really not thinking clearly when I was at that point in my life. And so, but I started asking the right questions, and I got to the point too where I was really scared about my brother's life. We were both doing heroin and cocaine, and he was always using a little bit more than I was. He was a little bit crazy, and I've always been a little bit more cautious. And then we had, within a month, two friends overdose. Um, one friend and another person I knew of, and so it started getting kind of real. And so I finally decided to get honest with my parents, because they knew what was going on, but they
Hmm.
didn't know. No, I mean, we lost a lot of weight. We couldn't hold a job, and just not doing well.
How old were
And
you during this
I
time?
was 20 at this point. I was 20 years old. Tyson was 19, 18, or just turning 19. We're 18 months apart. So we weren't doing good. And so And I didn't really, looking back at that point, I didn't really care about me. I knew that if something happened to my brother, that I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. And so it's like,
Hmm.
I need to get honest. So I told mom and dad, and within 24 hours, we're on the way into detox. And yeah, I went to detox. I went to the Ark of Little Cottonwood. March 16th of '06 is when I checked in there. And Tyson went to another treatment center after he kind of came out of the detox coma. He escaped and stole our friend's car and came to rescue me from rehab. I never even showed up. They did a whole lockdown thing, but anyway, so I had a little bit, did a little bit. He went through another program before he got sobered up for good. But yeah, that's kind of how the story of how I got into treatment, and when I was in treatment, I had some really cool experiences as well.
Yeah. So before we go into that, tell me like what your parents were thinking. Like, how did your parents are good, people, they're, religious. What did they think? Like, and I'm also curious to know, did they ever feel like judged? They've got these two sons that are going crazy. What was that like?
So, my mom has told me, a few years after we got into recovery, she told me that night that after we told them, she was so scared. And she said she was shaking at the keyboard, like trying to find a place for us to go. And I get emotional thinking about it now because I'm a parent now. And my parents, I'm sure they went through a lot, and scared to death, like their sons are probably going to die. I mean, that's what the people at Detox told them, like, oh, chances are one of your kids aren't going to make it. Like they scared them. And so, because we try to convince them, like, yeah, mom, we just need to do detox, then we're good. We don't need to go to rehab,
Yeah.
And so, and we were pretty good at manipulating our parents. But so the detox people, thankfully did a good enough job to say, hey, your kids need to get into a program. So, but yeah, to answer your question, they went through we put them through the ringer, me and my dad's relationship, and my dad and Ty, I mean, our relationships with our parents were not good, especially with dad. He was more of the, um, we could roll over my mom all the time, manipulate her. And, she was kind of the codependent mom. Dad was the one trying to set boundaries and lay the law. And we bumped heads pretty good. We're best friends today, but at that point in time, we did not get along well. But yeah, after we got into treatment, we were fortunate enough for them to actually take a suggestion and go to the family program. So at the ARC that I was at, they had a family program, like a once a month, get together. Let's talk about boundaries, the codependency, what that looks like. Different different things that can help them understand what we were going through and how our relationships can work. And then we'd have process groups. And so I was lucky enough for them to actually get involved. As a treatment center owner now, we have a family program. Oddly enough, my parents are over that. My
So
mom actually went
awesome.
back to school. So yeah, she's an LMFT now. And my dad, he's retired. Where he finds fulfillment is calling every one of these family members and invites them to family groups. So to see
Wow.
that come full circle is just so cool. Just so cool.
Hmm.
But yeah, our family's been through a journey for sure. And I think, with it, I mean, I don't know if I hopefully would be sober still today, but um, if just the fact then that to see them get involved when I got out of treatment, having a dialogue where I could be honest with them and also have accountability, but have a relationship that's honest. We can talk through things, and it was a huge help for my recovery just to be able to have that communication. And to have them, actually set really, really good boundaries and, have conversations like, hey, we're going to support you in your recovery. We can't support your addiction, but this is what we will do to help you. And this is what we won't do. And just have like, yeah, it was very healthy for me in
Yeah.
early recovery to have that.
So tell me a little bit about your relationship with your wife and how,
Yeah.
what that has been like, especially, with the church, with your recovery, how you guys met, where you're at now, all that.
Love that. Yeah. So, after I got out of treatment, dated a few girls, and then met my wife. I actually had briefly knew her in college. She dated a guy who I was more of an acquaintance, but his best friend was like one of my really good friends. So I'd met her before, like at a few parties, and started dating her, and just fell in love instantly with her. We were just like soulmates. Like we kind of knew from the beginning once we started getting to really know each other, and I had just such a good connection, and met her family, love her family, just the best parents ever. And so, and at that time, I was starting to go back to church. I was at that point in my recovery where I wanted to be more active. Because when I got into treatment, I was pretty much, I had a lot of shame, a lot of undiagnosed shame, I like to call it, but I had to work through a lot of things. And so, when I started dating her, it was kind of at that point, was going back to church, and her parents actually had fallen away from church at that point for a while. And so she wasn't really she hadn't been active in 5 or 6 years really either. And so it's like, hey, let's go back to church and see what that looks like. And then we got married, and then we got married in the temple. And yeah, it was just a really cool journey to get back involved with a different kind of perspective, and it's interesting. I thought I would. Well, I remember going to elders quorum, and the first thing they ask, when you have a new person in the ward or whatever, where'd you go on your mission? That's always one of the questions, and it was always one of those fears, like, oh, they're gonna ask that. And I was like in rehab, and so it was always hard for me to kind of get vulnerable and open up about that, but it was cool to actually just be myself, and open up about, I went into treatment, and I'm in recovery now, and yada yada yada, and then just cool things started happening where the bishop would have me speak at the fifth Sunday, that I'd speak, and I'd have people come up to me after and say, oh, I've got a son who's struggling, or my husband's struggling. Can you talk with them? And so it's kind of been a platform for service that's kind of given me some really cool opportunities to just be helpful. And I find a lot of fulfillment in that, in doing that. I'm like you do, and I think that's kind of what this whole podcast is all about, is kind of just reaching out, because there's people that reached out to us, and that was like, those people are my heroes today. When I first got in recovery and started getting relationships with people that were could open up to me, and I realized that I wasn't just like this person that should be in hell, that I had hope that I could work through things. Like, that's pretty cool,
And it's almost like you're able to have a mission, even though it's not like officially a mission.
Yeah.
It's like your mission wasn't putting a name tag on, and
Yeah.
but your mission is so incredible. So you started or own the Renaissance Ranch. Tell us how that all came to be. Like,
Yeah.
how long were you sober? How did that all come to be?
Yeah.
All the things.
So I'll tell you this. So when I got out of the ARC, I started going to different local AA meetings, and there were guys that I started to get to know that were from Renaissance Ranch, and they've always had a good brand, a good name, and then when Tyson had a relapse, this was, I think, in 2008. Yeah, I was living in Nevada at the time. I flew home, and basically wouldn't leave him alone until he checked into the ranch. So, the most codependent brother ever.
Yeah.
And so he checked into the ranch, and he was ready. He really wanted it to take his recovery to another level. So he went into the ranch and did really well. And then he got out, and after he was sober 2 years, maybe it was about 3 or so, he wanted to start an outpatient. And Renaissance Ranch was just a residential at the time. So he started the outpatient program, and started doing really well. And I was working with my dad at a company and sold the company. So I was out of a job. And started having conversations. Hey, what if we bought Renaissance Ranch and you could be the executive director there? Yada yada yada. And it was kind of a cool thing because the previous owner had dreams, or anyway, he didn't really want to sell it, but after the conversation, felt really good about it. So we bought it in 2014 and then merged the companies. Tyson had his company and the ranch. And so in 2014, we merged everything together, and we've been running it since 2014.
And it's cool because my husband went to Renaissance Ranch.
Yeah.
And so it's, I don't know, like I have just, I don't know, I've always felt connected to what you guys do because number one, my husband went there. And number two, I love that, you guys have gospel principles incorporated into your program. And I think, I mean, for my work, I work with thousands of treatment centers. I'm talking to them all the time. And that's something unique that I've never found. And I love that so much. And it's just something that, I think when you mentioned the God-shaped hole that you had,
Yeah.
I think it's really special what you guys are doing. And I love your program, and you and Tyson are obviously the best. So,
I can't take too much credit. I'll tell you, some of our clinicians have been there, but before we bought the program. I mean, I would say every person, but maybe one or two that I'm thinking of are either alumni at the ranch or they're in recovery. It's just the culture there is just, it's been ongoing since before we even bought it. It's just and the cool thing is we have these alumni events every quarter, every 3 months. And we still have alumni that have been through our program years ago show up to those. Right. We had over 100 people. We went out these giant VRBOs, and we just have a blast. So it's just all about the connection piece. Guys got out of treatment. They're part of a community that is already established, and they've got support if they need a job. We've got alumni who own businesses. We own businesses that they can work at, and I mean, we show up to each other's weddings. It's a community.
It's family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So alumni is everything for sure.
That's awesome. So I have a few questions from some folks on my Instagram page, and they have questions for people who have come back to the church. So hopefully you're ready to answer a few questions.
Oh yeah.
So one person asked, what are the very first baby steps for you for coming back? Like, what were the baby steps, the first ones?
Getting over myself, I think, just like, because I think for me at least, when I was wanting to come back to the church, it starts in the quiet moments, right? When you're in those quiet moments and you're feeling like something's missing, like you're remembering like what life was like when you had the Spirit with you, or when you were just having that like natural joy. And I think the world's really good at distracting us. We've got Netflix, we've got games, there's so many different things that can distract us, so we can stay busy most of the time if we really wanted to. But the things that are significant, the things that really like help us align with our purpose and our values, and the things that really bring us fulfillment aren't from this world. Right. And so when you're in those quiet moments, for me at least, it was like, okay, well, I'm obviously not happy, or I'm not as happy as I'd like to be. And so like, let's work on that, getting over myself. I think I was always hitting myself over like the head with this shame bat, like just kind of these feelings of unworthiness. And what's interesting is I teach a psych ed group at the ranch every Tuesday morning with our guys, our clients. And I have a group that I do on awareness, and I always have the guys put their heads down, and I ask them, hey, by the raise of hands, everyone keep your eyes closed. How many of you guys feel like maybe you just don't measure up, or you don't feel good enough? Like you just have those kind of, maybe those feelings sometimes that you're just not good enough, and then I have everyone open their eyes, and every time without fail, every hand's up. Because when we're in our addiction, or in, a lot of times we're just trying to feel good enough. We're just trying to feel like we measure up, and I think the adversary is really good at making us feel less than. At least, it's just what's been my experience, and it's just been reestablished every time I do that group. And so, to answer your question, I think just being able to realize that we are enough, and that we are worthy, and there was a brother that happened to come to this earth, and the atonement's real, and he took upon those things so we can, move forward. And that's great. I think that's what grace is all about, be able to just get over that. And so I think that was for me, the biggest thing is once I can okay, I can get over that. I am perfectly imperfect because I was built that way.
Right.
I don't have to be perfect to show up,
Yep.
And I think once I caught on to that concept, it was easy. I could show up, I could be me. And when I'm me, with all of me, even with my mistakes, the things I've done, you know, I can move on and I can inspire others to do the same. And that's, I think, part of my mission today.
That's so awesome. That is
Yeah.
amazing. Um, okay, let's see. How can a parent help a child who is away from the church without making them feel judged? You work with a lot of parents, and
Not
so
sending them texts and emails with the prophet talks and all that. um, yeah, I'm we should pull my mom on for this one. No, so when I was in my addiction, right, or just completely off the rails, my mom would always send me church talks, and for me, for her, it's her like trying to help, right? But for me, it's like I'm getting these, and my thoughts were, oh, she must not think I'm doing well. Like, why would she be sending me these? She must think I'm like a sinner, or you know what I mean? It's like.
Mhm.
And it could have been my view that was distorted, but I mean, I've worked in this industry for a long time. I've had this conversation many, many times with a lot of other guys, and that's a pretty common thread that I've heard is it kind of helps drive the shame when parents are always talking about those things, because that's how it was with me. They'd always bring up different things to kind of see how I was doing, or it's so you kind of have to. And if I'm talking to the parents, I back off a little bit.
Yeah.
Have conversations that don't involve the church with every conversation. And that might have been just with my family, because that every time my mom would talk to me, it had something to do with the church or the prophet or something with the LDS culture every time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I couldn't have like a real conversation with her.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably just maybe, partly my family's.
I think it's pretty, I would think it's pretty common because my dad, who I love dearly, he's amazing. And I love his testimony. Like I cherish his testimony. It's part of why my testimony is what it is. But I mean, he's pretty similar. Like I know that there's people in my family that, feel like, okay, like, but I know he does it because it makes him so happy. So like I feel so much for the parents in this situation. Like the church brings them so much joy and happiness that they want that for their kids. And like as a mother, I'm like, I can resonate with that. Like it's something I'm so passionate about, and I want my kids to experience that. And so I think it's such great advice for you to bring that up, because it really is the yearning of our heart to have those close to us experience the joy of the gospel. But like when you're in that situation, we need to, you do kind of need to back off a little bit,
I think, yeah. I mean, obviously, mom probably wrote that question, like, what do we say? How do we talk to him about it? And there's no right answer, I'll tell you that. But what I've seen help is when they try to have honest conversations. Like a lot of times, my mom would never tell me how she felt. And if she had an honest conversation and told me that she was scared, or that she was staying up till 3 a.m. because she was really like, she didn't know if I was alive. Like she had like honest conversations with me and like emotionally expressed what she was feeling. I would have been able to connect with her.
Right.
It was hard, would have sucked. But I think sometimes parents try to protect their kids too much, especially in today's age, when they need to I have a saying that I learned from one of we're from Chris Grove. She used to be one of our best therapists ever. She's got her own private practice now. She's amazing. But she'd always say, to parents, let go and let God. Sometimes you just have to trust God. Sometimes you gotta set a boundary, even though it sucks. Your kid's using heroin in your basement. You got to kick him out.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, even though that sucks, like most kids that die on heroin, they're dying in their parents' basements. You know, when they get kicked out, they have to ask the right questions, right? Or they end up in jail, which is fantastic for a drug addict because then they
Right.
actually have to get sober.
Yep.
You know, so once you have to kind of help do those things to get the kids to ask the right questions, and then only they can do that.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Awesome.
sure.
Do you have, this is another question from Instagram followers. Do you
Yeah.
have any doubts or concerns or things that bother you about the church? And if you do, how do you not let that shake your faith and, drive a wedge between you and your spirituality?
Um, I mean, yeah. I mean, sometimes um, one of the things I've worked on a lot in my recovery is finding acceptance, like the serenity prayer, which is God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So there's been some things that the church has done that I don't know if I agree with or really not, you know. But I just find acceptance in it. I try not to um, make things a big deal. Um, and so, yeah, that's just kind of been my perspective, you know?
Hmm.
So, yeah, probably,
Awesome.
yeah.
Love that. Love that. What advice do you have for somebody that maybe didn't serve a mission? They didn't, not necessarily because they were, on drugs or whatever, but what advice would you have for somebody that like loves the gospel, but they chose not to serve a mission?
I've had this conversation with guys before. I mean, half our clients at the ranch are LDS, you know, a lot of
Yeah.
them, like me, where they beat themselves up a little bit or they didn't want to go on a mission. And you, hey, dude, that's okay. Guess what? Jesus still loves you.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, like, guess what? Maybe your mission's something different, you know?
Hmm.
So, and I believe that, you know, maybe the mission is really something else, or maybe they, you know, be of service in other ways. And so, yeah,
Yeah. I love that so much. I feel like with my husband, he got sent home early from his mission and it was something that was really, really hard for him. But um yeah, I feel like we both together kind of have a mission that we're working on and this podcast is part of that.
for sure. I think people need to understand it. I'm talking to myself too sometimes, you know, it's like we make it so much of a bigger deal in our head, like
Hmm.
nobody else really cares.
Right. Right.
You know, like we like like dramatize it so much sometimes, different things, and
Hmm.
like, oh, that's okay. Like you can, like we all, like everyone. It's like the humanistic part of us. Like we all go through things. We all have trials,
Hmm.
you know. And it's like as soon as we can realize that we're imperfectly perfect, like we can like move mountains. You
Yeah.
can really see cool things once you realize that. Once you can
Hmm.
accept that, you know.
I love that advice because I feel like in our culture and I feel like people that haven't served a mission or maybe got sent home early, there's a lot of shame surrounding that. And so I just love that advice. So thank you for sharing.
Well, yeah, it's like, you know, at least they went.
Right.
At least they tried. You know,
Yeah.
like I didn't even make it to the baseball park. You know? At least
For
they got
sure.
there, got to first base. Maybe had to go. I'm sure he did some good there, you know. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, for the missionaries, I mean, I think a big purpose of that is for them to have their own personal growth, to go out there and experience things and to study and learn. And you know, there's more than one way to do that. You know,
Hmm. Hmm.
for sure.
Okay, next question. I know we're getting close to 5 o'clock, but what was the turning point that made you want to come back to the church? I know you were struggling with your addiction and then you got sober and like what was the turning point that made you go back to the church specifically and not just like spirituality or
I can't think of like a turning point. I just think it's like I mentioned, those quiet moments, just having enough of those quiet moments to just realize I was happier when I had the gospel of my life,
Mhm.
and finding the acceptance to realize that I don't have to be perfect. For me, it was I kind of had black and white thinking. It's like, okay, well, if I'm gonna be going to church every Sunday, I have to be perfect.
Hmm.
Dude, I went back to church and I would choose Zen in church. But that's like after I found it some acceptance, like I don't have to be perfect to go to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I have this huge mental block, like, okay, if I'm going to go back to church, I've got to be perfect. And
Hmm.
so that held me back for so long
Yeah.
to when I realized, I finally said basically, F it, I'm just gonna go.
Be you and just, yeah.
And one thing turned to another, and I chewed for years into my recovery,
Hmm.
until it took. Dude, I'm still a caffeine addict. You're not going to get me
Same.
to get that,
Same.
but it's like just show up and don't do it. I mean, you don't have to do it for you. Like, just see where you can maybe be of service.
Right.
The happiest when I go like everybody, we have spiritual like ebbs and flows, right? Like when I'm happiest, when I'm in this place that's like a really cool spiritual energy, and I'm feeling good. It's because I'm like being mindful of others. I'm
Right.
doing things like, what can I do to like help other people? When I'm in that kind of frame of mind, I seem to be happier than what is the church going to do for me? When
Hmm.
I have that kind of attitude, it just doesn't really get me anywhere, and I'm
Right.
unhappy. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so one last question for you. What are some things that you do like on a daily basis or, like what keeps you close to the church or close to the gospel or close to God? How do you stay close? There's so many just bad things that people say about the church, and I think it's louder than ever because of social media, and everyone has a voice and it's a loud one. And how do you stay grounded in your testimony on a daily basis and stay close to God?
What keeps me grounded in my testimony is an experience that I had in treatment that I'll never forget. And it happened my second week in treatment, where all the drugs were worn off and I was raw and I was feeling all these emotions. And I was in a really, really dark spot. And I sat down with my therapist. I'm like, dude, I can't imagine like me doing this sober thing. Like, this sucks. Like, I can't imagine me going on a cruise next fall with my friends and not getting completely shiz faced on the Carnival cruise. I can't imagine this sober life.
Hmm.
Um, and I want to leave. And he basically said, hey, why are you trying to do this on your own? And I respected this guy. He was in recovery. He got it. And I had somewhat of a connection with him. And so I was willing to hear him out. And so after expressing all this to him and like wanting to leave, and he basically had a really cool conversation with me, just leveling with me. And he's like, dude, why? But he said something that hit hard. He's like, dude, why? He's like, why are you trying to do this recovery thing on your own? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, don't you know there's a guy upstairs that can help you out? And for a second, I'm like, who's this guy upstairs? And I realized I'm on the top floor of the top floor, and he was talking about God. And he's like, dude, I'll challenge you. Just stay one day. Tomorrow you come and talk with me, and um, if you want to leave, like, I'll call your parents. I'll help you. Like, we'll go to the next phase, but give it 24 hours. But also, why don't you talk to God and see if he can help you out? Why don't you talk to him tonight? Can you do that? And I'm like, yeah, yes. And so that night, I had a really cool experience, and I kind of prepared spiritually. I read a little bit of the Bible, the Four Agreements, kind of like out of three different books that I had, just kind of try to get spiritually in tune, to kind of ask God, if he knew who I was, if he cared about me. And I got on my knees to pray, and I had this overwhelming sense of like a spiritual, like, warm blanket just like hugged me, and I just bawled. Like, for 10 minutes, I kind of felt, God's love, which is like so cool. And at that point in my recovery, 2 weeks in, just, I wasn't sleeping, coming off of opiates. You don't sleep, because opiates are your natural, um, like, sleep chemicals. When you stop taking opiates, your body freaks out. So I couldn't sleep for a while. And so after that experience that night, it was absolutely just phenomenal. And just, the the church actually did an interview with me. It's if you go to YouTube and you put 12 steps to change, I'm step 2 of the 12 steps. They did a whole series on the 12 steps. But yeah, so I talk about that more in detail on that video. But I mean, the next day I woke up and I just felt different. You know, I had hope again. I knew that God knew who I was. That God really was there, and it was completely life changing. And so, to answer your question though, how do I stay connected? I'm always praying. I'm always talking to God. I mean, that's my go-to. I suck at scriptures, suck at church. Probably have like, if you rate like A to F, I'd probably like a C, C plus at church. But I freaking knock out of the park with prayer, and I think I knock it out of the park with just connecting with other people who are like me, you know, that know that you know the gospel is universal principles, and you don't have to be LDS to take advantage of the gospel. I mean, anybody can, you know. God loves all of us. You know, he's you know, he's not gonna say, "Hey, you're my people." Say, "Hey, I love you guys. You're awesome." But you know, everyone's God's people. Jesus, you know, and so. And so, I like I said, I got back into church with a different perspective a little bit. It's a little bit different than I think of a lot of people's, but it's mine and it's real and it's raw and it works for me.
I love that so much. And I love, you know, what you said about connecting with people, because that's one thing that I know about you is like you have a huge heart and you connect with people, and it's, you know, I don't know, it's just really cool to see. And your story's so inspiring. And I just appreciate you being willing to take the time with me. And I am forever grateful that you pushed me to do this podcast. It means so much to me. So thank you so much. And thanks for being on my podcast.
I love this podcast. I'm so proud of you for actually doing it. A lot of people talk about doing things. You freaking did it, dude. So I'm proud of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Comeback Podcast and listening to our episodes. It would mean so much to us if you would like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps other people be able to find us, and we want to share this message to everyone.